Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to be covering today business plan creation and kind of why it's useful and why you would want to do a business plan. And as an account manager at NADF, I'm one of the people that would review a business plan and a financing application. So I want to build up a business plan right now and kind of tell you the things that we would be looking for if you were applying for financing to us. And even if you weren't, some of the other reasons why a business plan can be useful for you to create. So the first question is, what is a business plan? So it's basically your roadmap for how you're going to achieve business success. It's a tool that you can create based on the knowledge of the business that you're starting, and it kind of becomes a guideline for what your business is going to be doing, and it's a thought experiment. So when you're creating a business plan, there's going to be a bunch of questions and prompts that's going to make you think about your business, think about the industry, think about your competitors, and then see kind of how your business is going to fit in, how you're going to price your product, deliver your product, market your product. So if you're going to be applying for financing, you're going to have to do a business plan. It's basically like your resume. So you're going to be writing up a plan telling a prospective lender what it is that you're planning to do with the business. And they're going to be able to evaluate that plan and decide whether or not they want to lend you money so that you can go and start your business. However, even if you already have a business up and running, as the thought experiment is, you can do a business plan because a lot of people, when they start a business, they just kind of get up and go. So maybe it's a lawn care business or something like that. And somebody just says, well, I'm going to buy a lawnmower, some clippers, maybe I'll hire one person, and they go and they start running their business. So it's not very well thought out. And the business plan that we're going to go through is one that essentially has prompts. And so in each section, it's going to say, here you're going to identify your hours of operation. Here you're going to identify what your expenses are. Here you're going to identify what assets you need to actually run the business. And so even if you're not going and applying for financing, this thought experiment is useful to give your business some sort of direction and to prompt questions that maybe you didn't think of when you initially started running the business. So one of the first things to distinguish is whether or not this is a business or this is a hobby. And a lot of times people take their hobbies and they try to make them into businesses. But a business actually has to give you a decent amount of return. So the intention is to make some sort of profit. It has to be something that you can live off of. Otherwise, it's just a hobby. So for example, I make traditional bows. They take a really long time to make. And if I was to try to sell them, it might take me 20 hours to make a bow, but for $100 at Canadian Tire, you could get something that was better. So if somebody bought my bow and I charged $100, for one, they might not pay it because they could get something that's better for the same price. But even if they gave me $100, if I work 20 hours on it, I'm only working for $5 an hour, and that doesn't include the tools that I need, the wood that I actually need, which is pretty expensive to buy. And so then I would only have a hobby and not a business. And if you were coming to NADF for financing, say, we finance businesses, not hobbies. So you want to make sure that you're making a reasonable profit. You're going to have things like reporting obligations. So that means you're going to have financial statements. You're probably going to register your business. With a hobby, it's something you might enjoy doing, but it doesn't necessarily make enough money that you can live off of. So then it's just a hobby and it should probably remain a hobby. So like I said, for any business plan, they're relatively the same in terms of what they cover. So they're going to cover things like your company description. That's going to be an overall box around your company that'll say things like where you operate, what your hours of operation are, etc. You're also going to want to look at the industry that you're in. Is it a growing industry? Is it a competitive industry? You're going to look at your competitors and say, okay, if I'm going to enter this industry, what's my competition and what can I do better than them so that my business is profitable? You're going to look at your customers and say, is it something I'm going to design products or services that the customer actually wants? So you want to look at what that customer is looking for. Sales and marketing. So what are you going to sell your products for and how are you going to market those? The expenses. And then you're going to finally roll all this up into a financial plan. That's basically a pro forma statement that says what you expect to profit yearly, monthly, etc. So this is basically if you look online, if you went to CEDC, Community Economic Development Center, they're going to give you something that looks like this. So what I'm going to do is run through what our template looks like for business plans and kind of build it up. So you'll be able to side by side look at the way we're building the business plan here, and then you'll be able to do it with your business as well. Because otherwise, some companies charge 5,000, 10,000, 15, even $20,000 to build a business plan for you. So this is your step-by-step guide to be able to build one yourself. And you will need this no matter where you go for financing. And again, it's still a good thought experiment, even if you already have financing secured. So section 1, company description. Now, in the template that we have, and just in general, when you do business plans, your executive summary is exactly what it sounds like. It would be like the one-page summary for an executive so that they could quickly look through and in one page be able to tell the type of business that you run, why you're good at running it, why you think it would be successful. And then if you're requesting financing, you'll also include the amount of financing that you're looking for and why you would need that financing in the first place. So this is something we do last. And this is that summary of everything that's going to follow in one page. So someone could quickly look and say, I have a really good idea of what this person is doing with the business and what they need funding for. So this we would do last. This is sort of what it would kind of look like here. So we're going to use a company made up here called Jamie's Jams. So Jamie's Jams is a home-based business selling a variety of flavored jams harvested in northeastern Ontario region. Jamie's Jams is located in Timmins, Ontario. It's been operating since August 2021. They sell a variety of jams. You can see blueberry, raspberry. They would say, okay, first year profits expected to be $35,000 and then grow to $100,000 in 3 years' time. The funding request is that Jamie's Jams is going through a growth phase and requires some new equipment costing $20,000 that can be used for processing and packaging. So that's sort of what a high-level summary will look like, and then we're going to build out each of these sections so that you would be able to go and fill your executive summary in at the end. Okay, so starting here, company description. So you'll want to decide whether or not it's a year-round business or a seasonal business. So seasonal business is something that only operates for part of the year. So think of ski hills or think of lawn care. Those are things that aren't going to span the entire year. But Jamie's Jams, for example, that sells jams, would be a year-round business. Hours of operation. So you have to think about when your business is going to be open. Are you going to work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5? Is it going to be 7 days a week? Maybe you hire some extra help. Where your business is located, and what does your typical workday look like? And this is a question a lot of people, before they start their business, can't actually answer. So they might know the type of business, they might know the products they sell, but you want to think about what it is that you do every day. Because a lot of times there's things related to, say, financing and receipts or bookkeeping or maintenance or making phone calls that you don't think about. And again, this is why the business plan is a thought experiment. And I've asked a lot of would-be entrepreneurs, they're ready to go with their business. And I say, well, what does your typical day look like? And they don't know, and they have to think about it. So you want to think about what your typical day looks like. And then if you were filling out the template for a business plan, it would look something like this. And it would say, as your operation plan, what are your operating days, your business hours, location of operations. So for Jamie's Jams, they're going to be April to October. So sorry, they actually are a seasonal business. They're going to operate from Tuesday to Friday, 10 to 6. They're located in Timmins. They're going to have a specific area, an entrance with signage. So they're going to have signs or something made to advertise the business. They're going to have walk-ins. Saturday and Sunday are the days dedicated to harvesting the actual berries. And this fits into what are you going to be doing each day. So Tuesday to Friday is going to be the stores open. Saturday, Sunday is going to be picking the berries, getting inventory, orders, administrative tasks, etc. Okay. So after you've got that kind of initial plan down, so you know where you're located, you know where your hours of operation are, you know what you're doing every day, then look at things like specific certifications that might be required. If you have a partnership agreement or you incorporate, you're going to need those or a master business license. So To start a business, you don't actually need a master business license until I think you make $30,000 of sales over 4 quarters. But if you're going to apply for financing, we want you to have a business license, and most other lenders will as well. You might need insurance, depending on the type of product or service you're providing. So if you were doing, say, window cleaning, maybe you need something for working at heights for certifications, and you might need specific insurance too, because it's a high-risk job. So what would that look like? You would have a prompt, something like this, that says, are there specific certifications required, regulations for the business? So for Jamie's Jams, it would say Jamie's Jams is a sole proprietor. So they're not a partnership, they're not a corporation, they're a sole proprietor. They're in the food processing industry and retail. The business has a master business license, and they have business insurance of $5 million. To be able to work in foods, they have a food handling certificate that they got in June 2021. And the business is registered with the local health unit. And some specifics here. So if this was during COVID, you may have said, because of COVID-19, we have various safety measures in place, like wearing masks at all times, keeping safe distances, and washing hands. Okay, so this here is where you would think about, what do I need to actually run my business? Because a lot of times people will be starting it and not realize that to operate the business, they need some sort of certification or insurance. So this, again, this that thought and that prompt to say, what do I actually need to run the business? Sometimes it's nothing, but a lot of times you will require some cert. And then company description. So in this case, we talked about it a little bit because we went over the executive summary. But essentially, when you're making sales, you're going to be selling products or services. So what kind of products and services are you selling? In our case, we're selling jams, and we have different flavors: blueberry, raspberry, red berry, strawberry. We're going to do in-store sales, and we're going to do online sales. Now, sometimes it's just in-store, so that's brick and mortar. Sometimes it's just online, and sometimes it's both. So the online sales might take a while to actually kind of get an online presence. So maybe you start off with in-store sales and then have a plan to expand to online sales. But it's one of the things you want to think about is how is my product going to be available? Okay, so that was just a general overview now. We put that box around the business. We figured out where we operate, what our hours of operation are, what sort of certifications we need to get started, and the products and services that we're going to be providing. So we haven't costed anything or priced anything out right now. We just came up with the general business idea. Then we want to look at what the industry is. So we're going to be operating in some space, and we want to see and look at what that space actually is. So this section here asks you to comment on the industry that you're in. So these are examples of industries. There's things like retail. So those are basically selling in storefronts. You could be in construction. You could be food and drink production. Maybe you make soft drinks, tourism, accommodations, etc. So this is what an industry is, one of these sort of high-level categories of the space that your business is operating in. And obviously, we want to do some analysis on that to determine whether or not it's a good industry to move into. So we want to look at the market and the opportunity in that market. So when we're looking at a market, we're looking at, is the market going to be location specific? So if we're selling Jamie's Jams in a store, it's going to be specific to Timmins. Is our product going to be geared towards one gender or another? In our case, if it's jams, probably not. But if you were selling something like, say, video games or something like that. Video games tend to be played more by males and females, so then maybe your marketing and such would reflect that. Age group. Jams, probably going to be middle-aged. I don't know if there's a lot of teenagers going out and buying jam. But these are the sorts of things that you want to think about for your market, and then you'll be able to tailor your marketing plan to them and your business plan to them. So we want to see if there's an opportunity in the market anywhere. Do you have a skill that you want to share? What's the idea behind the business? Is there something missing in the community? So this is a big one, especially with NADF. A lot of the loans that we extend are to people in northern communities. And so there's a lot of things that are missing in those communities. And if there's something missing, then there's a business opportunity there. It's nice sometimes if you can go and test your sales. So if we were starting a jam company, maybe I give away free jam on Sundays at some store. And in return, maybe they send me feedback on whether or not they like them. And that way, if you were going to a lender, you can say, hey, like I've given out or sold at a low price a whole bunch of these jams, and people have given me really positive results. And you can take that and use that as part of the business plan application and include that you have some sort of beta testing for your product. So market overview and opportunity, if we were doing this for Jamie's Jams, we would say they're located in Timmins. Timmins has a population of 41,000, and the surrounding area is almost 78,000. So there's a lot of people. They're in the Cochrane district. There's no businesses in the area that specialize in homemade jams. So now we've looked and said there's an opportunity there that the market isn't providing. So the homemade jams contain no preservatives. They're made of 100% natural ingredients. With many individuals now focusing on their health, my jams will satisfy a need that is currently unmet in the Timmins area. This is why we're looking at industry to see, do we fit in somewhere? So maybe you go to a small town that has 10 burger joints. So you might say, hey, this is an oversaturated market. I'm not going to open up another burger joint, but maybe there's a space somewhere else for tacos or something like that. But we want to give this thought and say, what industry are we in and what kind of market opportunity is there? Another thing we want to look at is barriers to entry. So how hard is it to enter the industry or the market? If there's a lot of large upfront costs, if there's a lot of really specific insurance requirements or large technology implementations, that means that the market, if you get into it, competition it's hard for them to enter as well. So if you do like a lawn care business, it's pretty simple for somebody to come in and start challenging you. But if you started a tech company, that might be something that's a lot harder for someone to enter. So you want to look at what the barriers to entry are, and the higher the barriers to entry are, the more protected your business will be once you start it up. So if we were to look at Jamie's Jams, entry into the jam industry has moderate barriers to entry. Firstly, you have to have the amount of knowledge, or required knowledge, to be able to make jams that are both healthy and taste good. Secondly, there's a minimum level of investment required to purchase machinery that will improve production efficiency. So you might say that maybe you can make the jams on your own at home, but if you wanted to actually scale it up and make a business out of it, then all of a sudden you have to buy a lot more machinery, and therefore this is a higher barrier to entry. So in this case here, there's a Mixmaster 5000, only available in the United States. It costs $20,000, and there's additional costs for shipping this item, plus applicable duties and fees. But if you get the equipment, total production will be without the equipment, total production will be limited, plus the time per jar of jam will be increased. So this is making a case that if we can get the loan for this Mixmaster 5000, then we're going to be more competitive in the industry because we can increase total production and we can make more jam per unit of time. So each jam jar will cost less. And it means that if someone wanted to compete with us, they would have to get comparable machinery. And so therefore the barriers to entry are higher, which means you're in a more protected industry. Okay, so we looked at the industry. And now we want to look at the competition in the industry. So we're starting to get more into the specifics. Okay, we identify our industry. In our case, it's like retail, food services, food products. And then we want to look at who is actually competing with us. And we're going to have, for most industries, direct competition and indirect competition. And I had definitions here, but I think the difference between direct and indirect competition is it's easier to see like this. So your direct competition would be something like McDonald's and Wendy's. They sell the exact same stuff. They're corporately owned. It's drive-throughs. It's cheap food. At least it used to be cheap. And so they're basically direct competitors. But an indirect competitor might be something like KFC versus a local restaurant. So yeah, they both sell food, but KFC basically does chicken. It's a corporation. If you went to sit to have a dinner at a KFC, it's not particularly comfortable. But if you did it at a local restaurant, it might be someone that you personally know that owns it. You might get better service. You're going to get different types of food. So even though they both sell food, this is more indirect, but McDonald's and Wendy's would be direct. So when you're looking at your competition, I know someone that had a health food, kind of like fresh food storefront. And there was nothing like that in the area. So even though they're competing with large chains for people that wanted a healthy sandwich or a healthy soup, Most of their competition was indirect. So when we're looking at the competitors, we want to see market share. So how big is the competition? So if it's something like Home Depot is going to have a huge market share. So if you were entering in, you've got like a huge competitor there that has a large number of the customers that you want. You want to look at where your competitors are pricing their products at. So sometimes a competitor will have really expensive products and you can make something cheaper, so you can compete on that basis. Or maybe they have something that's really cheap and you're going to make something higher quality and you're going to compete on quality and not so much on price. You also have to consider location. So if something is 100 miles away, it's probably not a competitor and you might have the best location or be closest to the market that you're trying to address. So when you're looking at your competitors, you want to be looking at the strengths and the weaknesses, and then you're going to find a way to capitalize on at least the weaknesses. So for strengths, you're going to look at what does the competitor do well? What are they known for? And how do they attract customers to them? For weaknesses, you might be able to look at a Google review or something like that, something online, and find out that a whole bunch of people are complaining about something. So that's going to be a weakness of your competitors. Or they might not be providing services or products that the market demands. So when you're going through this exercise of identifying the competitor's strengths and weaknesses, this is basically your research. You're researching the competition, and you want to be able to identify where your business is going to fit in comparison to your competitors. So when you think of section 2 is looking at the market and saying, what does the market need? Or where is there a space in the market? And then when you're looking at the competitors, you're saying, okay, out of those that are in that market or in that industry, how can you beat out those competitors? And so you want to be able to identify where they're weak and then be able to capitalize on that. So for our business plan, we have something like this. So maybe you're going to find your top 4 competitors and you're going to kind of grade them based on their product variety, product quality, the prices, the marketing, customer service, business reputation. And you're going to try to find the weak areas here, and that's where your business is going to compete. So after you've done the competitor analysis, then you want to start doing the competitive advantages that you hold over your competitors. So section 3.2, you've already done the research on the competition. You have an idea how they operate. You know what they're good at. You know what they're weak at. So how are you going to offer something to the customers that your competitors are not doing? So if I was to look at Jamie's Jams again, let's just pretend that we did some competitor analysis and we've shown that the competition only sells mass-produced jams, which contain a large amount of preservatives. They also tend to be weak on customer service, on the customer service front, as evidenced by a large number of negative reviews online. So then I would say, for my business to be successful, I'll provide all natural jams, which are unavailable in the current marketplace, and make customer satisfaction a cornerstone of my operations. And the reason I was able to do this statement is because I looked at what the competition did or didn't do, and then said, this is how I'm going to be able to compete with them. So it's a useful exercise, and this is another example of, even if you already had a business operating, you could still get something from producing a business plan, because maybe you didn't do this thought analysis before, and maybe you're going to change the products that you offer, or the marketing, or how good your customer service is if you're noticing that this is a weakness in your competition. Okay, so we looked at industry, we looked at our own business, and now we're going to look at, we looked at our competition, and now we're going to look at what does the customer want? So for your customer analysis, you're going to be looking at the needs, wants, and dislikes and likes of your customer. This helps you understand where your products and services should be offered and at what prices. And it'll let you know how you should be marketing to your customers. So sometimes certain colors, certain phrases are going to be part of your marketing plan, and you're going to know which of those to use based on the customers that you identify. Okay, so these are the sorts of things you might be looking at. Ages. So for your customer, what age are they going to be in? What gender? Income. So sometimes if you're going and you're making a luxury product, then you're going to be looking at someone that has expendable income. If you were doing a a cheaper product, then you might be looking at someone that doesn't have as much expendable income and is looking to save cash by purchasing your product over some other one. And then location. So if you have a storefront, you're going to be looking at the immediate area. So in this case, we'll say it's the Timmins and Cochrane region. If we were selling jams in a store, we're probably not going to be attracting people from Thunder Bay just to go and buy jam. So looking at this and looking at the prompt, describe in detail your target customer. So Jamie Jam's customers would be all genders between the ages of 16 to 35 who live in the city of Timmins or in the Cochrane district. They have disposable income after they've paid their bills, and they're able to purchase homemade jams for themselves or as gifts. Now, this section here on customer analysis, this is something that's specific to our organization. And if you were to look just at a typical business plan, you wouldn't usually see this section in there. But for us at NADF, we care about life essentials. So if you're providing something to the community that's a life essential or drastically improves quality of life, that's some reason for NADF is to increase Indigenous prosperity. And it's not necessarily about making the most dollars. So in the business template that we have, if you can show a life essential for your community, then again, that's something that we would be preferential to lend to. So we can take the example of, say, delivery services. The business could be available to deliver small errand pickups for stay-at-home moms who do not have access to a vehicle during work hours. That would be something that you can add and say that not only do we have a good business plan, we're actually helping the community. And so this is something, again, this is kind of more specific to our business plan. And if you applied to funding, then you would want to have something to fill in for the life essential portion. Okay, lastly, demand for the customer. You want to customers desire to purchase your products at a specific price. So what's going to drive demand? The type of product that you're selling, the price of the product, and the lack of alternative products. So those are all things that you might want to include and say demand is high because the product's not being sold right now, or it is being sold, but it's really expensive, or my specific product doesn't have a lot of alternatives, and so therefore my customer will buy mine. Okay, section 5, sales and marketing. So we haven't talked about the dollar amounts in anything yet. All we've done is kind of strategize. We figured out where we fit into the industry. We figured out if there's market demand, what the customer wants, and what our competition is doing. And now we actually have to do some sales and some marketing. So we've got to attach prices to the products or the services that we perform. So what are sales? Pretty obvious. It's a transaction between two parties where one receives money and the other exchanges that money for either a product or a service. So all businesses are going to have sales, at least hopefully, and you're either going to sell products or sell services. When you're looking at the amount of sales that you're actually going to be attaining in any particular period of time, you're going to be looking at what you're selling your product for and the number of units that you're selling. So this here is going to dictate so much in terms of feasibility for your business plan. So you don't want to overestimate the selling price and you don't want to overestimate the number of units, because if you don't reach those number of units, then maybe you're not going to have enough money coming in to offset your costs. So you want to be realistic. You want to be conservative. If you can test your product small scale or your service before you go and invest a bunch of money and rack up a bunch of expenses, you want to be able to test the market if you could to see whether or not it's worthwhile putting a bunch of time and money into a project. So sales and revenue is the core of your business, and it determines how high your expenses can be. So you can't have a whole bunch of expenses running over and above what your sales are. So this goes back to being realistic about sales and being conservative. And it's going to determine whether or not your business is viable at all. And so if we were to look at Jamie's Jams again, in this case here, we would be breaking down into monthly sales. And because Jamie's Jams is seasonal, if they're operating, I can't remember what it was, April, May, June, July, August, September, so those 6 months, you would be able to break it down by month and then multiply this by 6. So in this case here, we're going to get into pricing, but for just this slide, we're pricing at $13.50. we expect to make these number of sales in jars. And so when we multiply these all out, we end up coming up with $3,240 per month in sales. Now, when you're pricing your products, there's two main categories of ways to price the product. You can do what the competition is doing and saying, I'm going to price lower than you and try to get more sales that way. Or you can look at value-based pricing. So if you have, especially if you have a special product or a high quality product, in this case here, you're going to add the value to make the product look more desirable. And to do that for Jamie's Jams, for example, they're going to figure out that it costs them $9 to create a jar of jam, and then they're going to add 50% on top of that. So this now isn't competing based on price. It's looking at what does it cost to make and then adding some sort of percentage. You could do more if it's a real specialty product or very high demand product, or if you're trying to create a product that appears to be a luxury item, you can add more cost to that. And then this is something a lot of businesses don't think about either before they get started here is how are you actually going to contract payments? How are you going to receive the payments? So if you're doing a lawn care business, are you going to take cash? Are you going to accept an email transfer? There are products and services like Square and Stripe where someone could tap their card on your phone and it would register that way, but these have fees associated with them. But you do want to decide how you're actually going to collect your payment. And sometimes this isn't easy to determine. And sometimes it requires a little bit of kind of tech know-how if you're going to add something like Square or Stripe in. Obviously, Interact, email, and cash are pretty simple. But how are you going to take payments is a question to consider if you haven't already. And there's a lot of options out there. So for Jamie's Jams, they're active on Facebook. You can contact them through Facebook. They utilize a Square device, an app that lets them process payments via debit or credit. And you'll see a lot of small businesses have Square. It's kind of this white unit and you tap it, but that's their terminal to be able to collect sales. They also do accept email transfers. Once the sale is finalized, a receipt of the sale that shows details of which jams were sold and payment verification will go to into our daily sales envelope. So they're going to be tracking the sales and they're going to be tracking like how much they sold of each type of jam. And then it's processed at the end of each week into the bookkeeping program. Lastly, marketing. So you have your sales, you have the product you're selling, you have the price you're selling it for, and then you have to market this product. And as we discussed before, based on what your target customer is going to dictate the types of marketing that you're doing. So you have options like social media, Facebook, print advertising, newspapers, magazines, posters. So sometimes these things work better for some types of people versus others. Radio ads, TV ads, billboards, word of mouth, etc. So this year, I'm not going to go into much more detail than that, but you're going to have to determine some sort of way to get your product out there, and you should be looking at what your customer is to determine the words, the colors you use, and the medium for the delivery of the marketing message. Oh, just quickly here, when you're doing marketing, you want to look at these four things here. So product, so what are you selling? The price, what are you selling at? The place, where is it available? And it might be online. And then promotion, so what are you actually going to do to advertise your product, your price, and your place? So 4 P's of marketing. And let's look at Jamie's Jams here. So Jamie's Jams is going to utilize a Facebook page that will provide all relevant business details. And Facebook pages, by the way, they're great and they're free. I will be the main one monitoring the page and messages to assist with questions or sales customers may have. In addition, I'll be utilizing vendor tables during the summer and fall. So going and actually setting these up sometimes with free samples could be a way to get your product out there. Plus, people like to reward businesses that give things for free. So if you came and you had a little sampler, you might say, hey, I really like that. It's a local business. They let me try the product without having to buy it. I'm going to go and reward that business owner by buying their product in the future or recommending them. The products have stickers on the jars that have the company logo and contact information. Jamie's Jams has business cards available with that logo, with contact information, so customers can easily contact. So we have a few things there. We've got a Facebook page, we've got going to markets, and then having advertising that's appropriate on the jams with contact information. Okay, business expenses. So we talked about the sales, but the sales is going to be your top line. That's the amount of money coming in, but there's going to be expenses related to those sales. So we need to go and identify all the business expenses we have. And then when you take your sales, less those expenses, that's going to be your profit. And that's going to determine if your business is viable or not. So there's all kinds of business expenses you can have. And when you're trying to create a list, you really have to think about it. And it's good to maybe look at sample businesses online that are in the same space and see what kind of expenses they have, because you might forget things like internet and phone. You might forget that you need office supplies. No matter what kind of business you are, you're still going to need pens and paper and probably a computer, printer, etc. You're going to need insurance for basically any type of business. You might have credit card, legal, license, regulatory fees, and advertising. So there's a whole bunch there, but you have to go and identify all of these. And then just like we did with sales before, so sales we had $13.50 for each jar and all the different types of jams that we had. Well, we're gonna also list all of the expenses that we have: our rent, business insurance, internet and phone, etc. And then you're gonna total all of these up to get your total expenses. So the financial plan is putting this together. So let's look at Jamie's Jams. And this is the final piece, and it's at least one of the most important pieces on your business plan. And let's look at this example here. So we took Jamie's Jams. We went over this first when we went over the sales. We looked at the number of units they sold. They brought in $3,240 per month. And then here's a bunch of potential expenses: rent, business insurance, internet and phone, salaries, because you have to pay yourself a salary, and maybe you have other employees as well. Interest expense, so maybe you have a loan and you pay interest on it. And when we add all these up, $3386.95. So we have more expenses than we do in sales. And so what does that look like? It says we lose $147 every month, and we're losing $1,763 a year. So this is not a viable business the way that it is. And so there's a few things you can potentially do here to improve profitability and make the business viable. For one, you could potentially cut expenses. So maybe you can find a place where the rent's a little bit cheaper, or maybe you can find a new business insurance supplier that'll lower this cost. Or you can try to sell for a higher price. Maybe $13.50 is just not enough and you'll have to sell for $15, or maybe some of these jams that sell $60 per month instead of $25, maybe the blueberry and the strawberry, because they're more expensive, maybe these are $15 and the others are $13.50. Or maybe you can actually increase sales by doing a better marketing plan and bringing in more people with that marketing plan. So what I did here was actually increase the number of sales. So I increased each of these by 10. So instead of 45, which is what it said on the previous screen, sudden monthly sales are 32 or 39.15, and our expenses are still the same. Now all of a sudden we have $528 of profit per month and $6,300 in annual. Going to need, and then if you cut or from somewhere else, it's going to be basically what we just did. It's going to break this down by section. It's going to ask you for prompts, and then you're going to be able to go and fill those out. And then in the end, you essentially have a business plan. Last note for bookkeeping. So if you are coming to NADF for financing, we want you to have a bookkeeper in place. As you can see from this slide here, the bookkeeping tells you how much money you're making, and it tells you things like, well, how much your expenses are. And so you might be able to look at these and do some analysis and find places where you can save expenses. We don't think most people should probably be doing their own bookkeeping. You're going to be good at whatever it is that your business is that you're trying to create or the products that you're trying to sell. And so most of your time as a business owner should be towards running the business and not so much on the financial side. I think it's a good idea to have a decent background in what financial statements are. And we do have a similar lesson like this just on financial statements. But otherwise, you should have a plan for bookkeeping and somebody that you know that you're going to go to, or at least once business starts, someone that you're going to look for. So it's important that you have this planned out beforehand, just like all the other aspects of the business that we covered. And without, yeah, so yeah, that's everything on business planning, and hopefully it was useful to you. And if you are going to be creating a business plan, going through this step by step and following along should make it a lot easier, because when you get that template of a business plan, it looks overwhelming at first, but when you go through it section by section and you break it up into small pieces, it's a lot easier and more manageable for you to build your first business plan. Thanks.